Let's go, Ridernation.
I'm ready. I'm ready. Yeah, here we go. It's a feeling now. Hit 'em high, hit 'em low, 'cause we're dealing now. Everybody's giving it all they got, 'cause we're ready.
Welcome to the Piffles podcast, your Saskatchewan Roughriders fan podcast. And we have some big news here on the show.
Big news?
Well, it's important news that people should know. So last week, Greg wasn't here. He was holding out for more money. He was going to Eugene Lewis. He wanted $300K a year. That wasn't going to happen. We have a new general manager here with the Piffles podcast, and they're very, very cheap. So that wasn't going to happen. So we said we were going to have contract talks with Greg over the last week, and we did. Our GM, our new GM, talked to him or his agent. What I don't know. I'm not allowed in those conversations. And Greg did balk again.
Our people talk to his people.
Yeah, he balked again at our $0 offer. So we increased that offer to $0 and a Chris Streveler video. And because of that, I'm happy to say that Greg has agreed to rejoin the Piffles podcast because he can play a Chris Streveler video kind of whenever he wants. Not quite.
Say his name and he appears.
Steve believes in Chris Strevi. Steve believes in Chris Strevi.
'Cause they love him in London and Paris and Tokyo, America, Scotland and Canada.
I think it's
And
my
for that
turn to
reason-
hold out.
And that reason alone, Greg, welcome back to the Piffles podcast. I see you signed the contract.
When you're a main event player, you sign main event contracts, and for that video alone, well worth it. Well worth it.
So I don't know if that's good news or bad news, but either way, big news. Greg is back to your Saskatchewan Roughriders fan podcast, the Piffles podcast. Of course, you got me. I'm Alex.
I'm Steve.
You're just so defeated. I love it.
He doesn't even
Thanks for
realize I took a 25% pay cut to make his raise happen, and this is the thanks I get.
Yeah. Well, it's
Yes,
not all.
yes, it is.
It's not all sunshine and lollipops. The grass isn't always greener, as you just found out. Thanks for listening wherever you get your podcasts, watching on YouTube or SaskTel Max TV on demand. Piffles podcast, of course, brought to you by our great friends at Dairy Queen on Elphinstone Street and Sask Drive in Regina. You know where to follow us. We're on social media. We're not hard to find. Piffles Pod, you'll find us everywhere. Yeah, exactly. Just look up top. But there wasn't a lot of news that came out, but the news that came out since our last episode, pretty big news. So we might as well just jump right into it. It's time for the opening kickoff.
I don't know. You're burning the lead on Rondell Boythroyd. Like, you are completely burning the lead on him.
Our brand new star defensive lineman, yes. The Riders making one big signing Rondell Bothroyd, who's kind of a tweener, actually. I was reading up on him. A little bit big on the edge, but a little undersized as a defensive lineman to be as a tackle. So I expect him to play edge in training camp, and the Riders are going to need pass rushers. There's an option right there. So one of those signings that I don't want to say means nothing right now. Obviously, it doesn't light anybody up, but I also remember there was a time in March or April of 2008 that a guy named Weston Dressler was signed, and nobody said anything about it. So who knows? You never know.
And that's the thing about those edge rushers. You don't know. Like, it could be someone you don't expect, and they just have that ability to get around an offensive lineman. So we need a pass rush. So here's hoping.
It's absolutely a position we needed to improve from last year. So I hope we see a bunch more of these little signings just to see where it goes.
I think Jeremy O'Day will be quite active on the defensive line and defensive back field over the next couple weeks as free agency gets closer and closer. We'll talk a little bit more about free agency in just a bit, just with the times that were announced by the CFL. But stop me if you've heard this one before. What jungle cat does Andrew Harris run like? Greg, do you know?
I had a Christmas ornament with it around here somewhere.
Well, let me
Puma,
take you.
no. Leopard, no. Spots. Stripes? Spots. Definitely has spots. Cheetah?
Let me take you back to Tuesday, August 27th, 2019. It says 3:08 a.m. I can't imagine it was actually posted then. Greg, that's how you started off your article about Andrew Harris called "No Running from This" for Harris. So this is something that's been
I wrote something?
5.5 years in the making. So obviously we all know the news, the big news here in Roderville. Andrew Harris, public enemy number 2 over the last 2 decades here in Roderville, as opposed, behind Henry Burris. We're going to debate that in a second, actually. But Andrew Harris hired as the running back coach. Okay. Who's more universally hated in Roderville? Is it Andrew Harris or is it Henry Burris?
Jeremy O'Day.
I was going to say Chris Jones, so but only for his time in Saskatchewan. I think it's Henry Burris, no question in my mind. Henry Burris was hated for longer, and the hate was much stronger. We hated Andrew Harris, but it was because of what he did on the field, and that's about it. He was just an absolute beast on the field. We hated Henry Burris because of how he left. That's a hate that doesn't leave.
It did leave.
I'd argue actually John Cornish is probably more hated than Andrew Harris, but with Harris it was one of those I hate you, but damn it, do I respect you type things. Like I respect everything Andrew Harris did, especially coming from the junior ranks. Hard to do and to become one of the best ever. But at the same time, I'm not going to sugarcoat his. I'm still waiting for the proof, Andrew. I'm sorry. Like, hey, now that we're on the same team, if you want to come over here, we can discuss this. We can hash this out. I'm still waiting for that proof.
I don't think they'll approve that request if I put that
Probably
in.
not.
Probably not.
Andrew Harris is coming nowhere near the Piffles podcast.
Probably not. Back in the day, he might have been the very first member of Amy's Hottie Bowl. I think he might have. So
I'm pretty sure he was.
Pretty important figure here on the Piffles podcast, that Andrew Harris guy. But joins the Riders coaching staff as the running back coach. Last year's running back coach, Anthony Vitale, is gone due to personal reasons. So this is a move that is more than a year in the making. Arash Madani of Sportsnet said it wasn't a done deal, but I can see this happening. He said this in December of 2023 about Corey Mace's coaching staff. So it took a year, but it finally did happen. And outside of the whole testing for steroids and all that kind of stuff, as a coach, do you guys like this move, bringing him in?
I'm curious.
No question in my mind.
I'm curious on a few things. Like, typically, star players have never really translated to being great coaches because they're physical. Well, yeah, prime example. Because typically stuff came easy for them. You find your better coaches are, coincidentally enough, backup quarterbacks because they have a better grasp of the entire game. And this is nothing against Andrew Harris. I think he might be a good coach, but he doesn't really have much of a foundation because after he was retired, he was supposed to go coach in the junior ranks, and that still has not happened yet.
Well, he's like the president, isn't he, of the team?
Yeah, they quietly made him the
director
when he didn't become head coach. Yeah, the Vancouver Island Raiders, they made him a glorified GM/president. but
Yeah,
I don't know how much he
football
actually
guy.
did with that.
I mean, if for no other reason than his relationship with AJ Ouellette, this is a great choice. I mean, this is a guy that got Andrew Harris wearing Rider green last season, and whoever saw that happening? Clearly, there's a good relationship there. Well, Ouellette had his best season with Andrew Harris, in that tandem. I think that alone and that comfort level will bring something to AJ's game. But he's a guy that's really done it all. He's 4-time champion, and we've seen what Corey Mace is loading up with on this coaching staff. It is championship caliber coaches. I wish I'd actually done this ahead of time and counted the number of Grey Cups there are on that coaching staff, but that number is not a small number, and he just brings that extra winning element. And a huge kudos to the Riders for using the Argos Grey Cup picture as his announcement picture. That was some quality Greg level trolling.
Yeah, right after they beat the Bombers in Saskatchewan for the Grey Cup.
I told you guys it was an A+ move. The minute I saw recognized what the picture was, A+ move.
And Steve, I'll just echo what you said there, because my thoughts are, positional coaches like this don't light me up in any way. I'm not a coach. This isn't something that I pay too much attention to, but again, just the quality of championship caliber guys that he's bringing in. Corey Mace, 4 Grey Cups for Andrew Harris. So these are guys that know how to win. And when you put that in the locker room, it just trickles down, right? So for that reason, I love the move. What it means on the field, I don't know yet. Whatever. But I'm all for seeing a young coach get a shot. And it's not like he's getting offensive coordinator right off the bat, right? So it's a positional coach. Who knows? He might turn into a really great coach. He might not be. Who knows? But we'll find out in 2025. And I mean, the guy is one of the greatest running backs of all time in the CFL. And if he can just elevate our running backs just that much more, then great. But that's where I stand on it. So whatever.
I mean, there's got to be some bonus points if Andrew Harris is lifting the cup wearing Rider green in Winnipeg in 2025. That would just be icing on the cake.
They should. You know how what was it? Joe Sakic handed the Stanley Cup to Ray Bork. That's what it should be in Winnipeg. It should be just like Trevor Harris grabbing the Grey Cup and just handing it straight over to Andrew Harris. That'd be just
that'd be beautiful.
But it is funny because I'm thing I love most about this signing of Andrew Harris as our running back coach is the complete 180 of Ridernation. People that hate him, could not stand him, now all of a sudden love him, maybe scrubbing their social media accounts of everything they've said about him.
That takes me time.
I think there's still an anabolic Andrew reference out there somewhere.
Probably.
But there is a big portion of Rider fans. Like, this move is split Rider Nation. Some people love it. Some people absolutely hate it. Terry on our Facebook says, great. Juicer Harris is going to be one of our coaches. I hope the players ignore his life lessons. 10,000 times worse signing than Mayer. So that just goes to show you just where people are at.
As long as they don't put him in charge of the morning milkshakes, it's going to be fine.
At least he's not the nutritional coach, right?
Right? Like, people need to relax. Just hop on board the Harris train. We're all there. Let's enjoy the ride this year.
Unless he's like a Ron Hextall and is sent in to infiltrate the Riders and wreck them from the inside, like Hextall did with the Penguins. But I don't think that's the case. So there's the news for the Riders this week. And I guess we'll see Andrew Harris in training camp. And who knows if AJ Ouellette's not fully healthy or whatever, at least they got a guy that can kind of step in if they need to as well in that power position. So
Oh,
There you
the
go.
old Chad Cackert role here.
Well, the CAC attack.
Yeah. Oh, we would love to bring him in, but we're going to bring him in as a coach. Oh, he's now retired as a coach, and he's back signed as a player. Woo!
I mean, it would help with the ratio. So if injuries occur to the Canadians, I wouldn't be surprised. But there we go. Andrew Harris, a Rough Rider.
Still weird to hear that.
Yep. But the thing we were all waiting for the last month plus, the CFL schedule is finally out. And Steve, you took a kind of a deeper look into the schedule, but I think it's a good, friendly schedule for the Riders, not so much for fans, for traveling, for the out-of-towners. But so let's go over the schedule just a little bit here. The reason why it's good for the Riders is, one, the bye weeks are spaced perfectly. Week 5, 10, and 16. You cannot plan that any better. So I think they won the jackpot on that one. And no short weeks. Shortest time between games is only 6 days. So there's no 4-day turnaround, no 5-day turnaround, 6 days. So you can get in basically your full week of prep. And I think that's the biggest thing for the Riders is prep time. There was a lot of short weeks last year. And you could see in those, in that second game, in that second half, that team just kind of just geared down. So,
And do you know why there's no short weeks this year? We have one Thursday game all season instead of, what was it, 4 last year?
yeah.
One Thursday game, and it's the season opener. And that's it. That's why. This is the perfect schedule from a football operation standpoint, because of that lack of short weeks and perfect bye weeks. But I'm not mad that we only have to sit through one Thursday game.
But I want to know what I'm supposed to blame now when they lay an egg.
St. Catherine's flu. No matter where they go, just blame the St. Catherine's flu.
Yeah, just blame it on Montreal.
So there's the one Thursday game. There's 3 Friday night home games, this is where I'm getting to the part where it's not necessarily good for out-of-towners. Personally, for us, we live in Regina. That's great for us. You can have your full day of work. You got the night game, and then you have the whole weekend off to do whatever. So to me, that's perfect. And who doesn't love those games under the lights on Friday nights? Like, those are just so much fun. But again, when you only have down to 15,500 season ticket holders, because a lot of out-of-towners gave up their tickets, it's not really friendly for them. I mean, there is the 4 Saturday home games and the 1 Sunday game, which is the Labor Day weekend game. It's tough to sell that to out-of-towners to buy season tickets.
But here's the thing. If you look at it from a out-of-towners versus in the city standpoint, this is split perfectly down the middle. And a lot of people, especially as you get into the summer months, the in-city folks want to start their weekend and get out to the cabin, go out, camping wherever they're going. And this split between Friday and Saturday games kind of meets the both of them in the middle. You got the out-of-towners who might miss a couple of games because of the Fridays, and you got the in-towners who might have to shorten a few weekends because of the Saturday games. You really, from a fan standpoint, this is about as evenly balanced and friendly as you can ask for. But the biggest thing to me is that outside of the 1 o'clock game, there are 8 games that start at 5 o'clock or later. That is perfect to me. So even those late Friday games are starting at 7:30. Your out of town folks can take Friday off and make it in time for kickoff. Or if you're a Saskatoon guy, you can leave after work and still make it in time for kickoff. There's no perfect scenario, but I think they got as close to nailing it as you could ask for.
And we can have the lights out game, and it actually is going to work.
With the lights out.
Yes.
Watch. They'll plan that one for the 1 o'clock on Saturday.
I assume that 1:00 game is going to be the Family Day game. That's just my educated guess.
Whichever one's
Next week-
around Craven's country roots, guarantee you that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, next week we can play Pick the Themes and see how many we get right. And which one Jess Moskaluk is going to sing at.
Yeah.
All of them.
And then the Labor Day game, of course, is going to be at 5:00. So lots and lots of pre-gaming going on.
That's a marathon day for a bunch of people.
Yikes.
But generally speaking, when you look at what the schedule is, home, road, home, road, home, road, almost the whole way through. So there's not a lot of back-to-back weeks where they're on the road or back-to-back weeks where they're at home. I think there's 2 weeks where they do their Hamilton and Toronto back-to-back on the road. And then they have a home game and then a bye week and a home game mixed in there. So they still have 2 home games back-to-back, but there isn't a scenario though where you won't see the team for 4 weeks, which we saw, last season or the last couple of years. We've seen that where they would have 2 road games and then a bye week, and then you'd finally have a home game. So it'd be a month in between home games. So it's something that keeps, I think, it'll keep a lot of fans interested a little bit more, in the sense that if you're only the super casual fan, you're just kind of paying attention to the team when they're at home or if they're winning, whatever the case is. This will keep them just a little bit more interested, knowing that they're at home every second week. So,
well, I think especially if you got a team that's either rolling or a team that's in every game, if they're here next weekend, it's easier to sell a ticket than, well, the Riders are going to be in town in 4 weeks, but they just dropped 2 in a row to Ottawa and Hamilton. So maybe we won't be that excited. So I think it's definitely a way to keep fan engagement going up, especially if you can get a team that's rolling at the right time.
The only part of the schedule that kind of is tough from a lengthy away stretch is right after Banjo Bowl. I think we play again at home on the 13th of September, and then we don't play again at home until October 10th because it goes bye week, and then the 2 games back to back in Edmonton and Ottawa on the road. So there is that one stretch, but even then, that's less than 4 weeks between games. That is the only stretch of that length. That's a lot better than several of those last season.
and then my only gripe about the schedule is no good Eastern road trip options. There is one, but it's game. There's a game in Toronto on a Saturday and a game in Hamilton, or Rider game in Hamilton on the Saturday as well, too, back to back. So you basically have to duck out at halftime to make it. So no road trip for me this year. But the CFL also announced their key off-season dates. We all know that February 2nd is the beginning of the Ed Hervey Memorial, where the tampering window. Yeah,
I guess he's the GM of the Elks, so I guess that is just as equal to being dead, I guess.
Yeah. So the tampering window opens Sunday, February 2nd at noon Eastern, so that'll be 11 o'clock our time, and then ends a week later. Then February 11th is when free agency officially opens. Blah blah blah. Regional combines. The CFL combine will be in Regina this year, 2025. We knew that already, but now we have the dates. It's March 21st to 23rd. So that'll be pretty neat to check out if you're in Regina. And draft day will be April 29th. Of course, they're doing the global draft super early in the day, and then which will be at like 9 o'clock Saskatchewan time. And then
so many kickers.
I hope so. And the CFL draft will be at 6 o'clock that night. I'm sorry, what's that?
2 rounds, 18 picks, and 12 kickers.
Yeah, we'll put the over-under on that. And then we know when rookie camps open May 7th and training camps open on May 11th. So that's what we know. So start counting down the days now. And one more thing here on the opening kickoff I wanted to bring up, and this is a Calgary Stampeders thing, but I'll tie it in. I want to give a shout out actually to the Calgary Stampeders, and you guys know this. I'd never do that, but it's really cool with what they do.
Blink twice if you're under duress.
for fans that renewed their season tickets. They called them season ticket members there. Peyton Logan, along with Connie, who works with the stamps. We know if you've been around at Grey Cups or around the CFL, you know who Connie is. Fantastic person. Her and Peyton Logan went and surprised a stamped season ticket holder. Showed up at their door, knocked on their door, and basically said, "Thanks for renewing your tickets. Here's a signed game-worn jersey and 2 boarding passes to fly with the team on their charter to any away game of their choosing this season, just for renewing their tickets." So for me to tie this all back to the Roughriders, hey, Craig, you got anything to say about that?
He's going to show up to somebody's door and give a 10% discount at the Riders store.
If you spend $300 or more. Yeah. But it's just another one of those things. Marketing. We talk about it a lot on this show. That's pretty cool for the Stamps. So I'd like to see more teams do that. I'd like to see this team do that or something similar like that, and not just have a stationary phone message that they send out. Hey, this is Trevor Harris. Thanks for renewing your season tickets. Go Riders. Click. So
all I know is Trevor Harris has my phone number. That's all I got out of that.
I have his phone number, actually.
Just call him up randomly one episode, see how it goes.
We should see if he answers. Although it's probably like his kids are probably sleeping. It's like 11 o'clock wherever he is. Don't think that would go over very well.
Probably.
Only one way to find out. That's the opening kickoff presented by Kathy Festian of Royal LePage Regina Realty. Let's jump to the Churchill Brewing Company odds and end zones. We started talking about Andrew Harris, and obviously when you do that, there's the juicing, there's the testing for PEDs and whatnot. So keeping with the rider theme, a former rider and now former Edmonton Elk Loucheiz Purifoy was suspended 2 games by the CFL for testing positive for a banned substance. Oh, okay. So the news came out. He was released. Whoa, okay. He should have been an all-star last year. Was a very good safety for Edmonton. Got released. Okay. And then a couple hours later, oh yeah, he tested positive for PEDs or whatever. Tested positive for a banned substance. Okay, that makes sense why Edmonton would release him. Then the CFLPA came out and strongly protested this. In their words, we strongly protest this, as it was basically Adderall for ADHD. So from what I saw on social media, fans started giving it to the CFL, saying that's ridiculous, blah, 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 which I think is a fair criticism. Although whatever, I don't have the exact wording of whatever part or drug is in Adderall there. It's on the banned substance list. So the league is within their rights to do that. So where do you guys stand on this whole thing? Because now that the CFLPA came out with a statement, then the league came out with a statement, I've swapped back and forth on this. So I want to hear where you guys are at on this one.
As the father of 2 kids with ADHD, I get it. I really do. Especially my boy, Connor. Like, you can tell when he is not medicated. And each has its own shade of brilliance. But definitely sometimes he needs to be medicated, and that's fine. He's also a 9-year-old kid. Loucheiz Purifoy is an adult. He knows what he should be taking when he should be taking it. I think there needs to be, without knowing the full inner workings of the CFLPA, CFL drug policy, I'm certain there are exemptions for medical.
Yeah, you have to apply for something, but it can be done.
For something like this. And if one, Loucheiz didn't do it, or 2, he's not taking something that's within the approved list, that's on him. At the end of the day, he's a grown-ass adult, and he needs to know what he is taking And that's the same thing with our new running backs coach. I said the same thing about him. As a player, you need to know what's going in your body and how you need to be using it, whether it was a mistake or not. And I stand by this on Loucheiz Purifoy. Do I feel bad if he took something out of cycle or whatever, or maybe he was prescribed something and didn't read the bottle properly? It happens. That said, I'm surprised Edmonton let him go for 2 games. I also think that's probably he wanted more money, and Ed Hervey flat out said no, too bad, and use this as a convenient excuse.
I'm kind of on the opposite side of this, and that my defense of Purifoy comes directly from the CFLPA's statement. Now, he took Adderall and admitted to it and had all the testing done afterwards to confirm that he does in fact need it. And according to the CFLPA's statement, the CFL instructed the Edmonton Elks to not apply for an emergency therapeutic use exemption. And that would have allowed, and this is their statement, which would have allowed an independent medical review of his case. It seems like they basically pushed this in the direction of a suspension when it could have gone through this medical use case. And such a strange, I don't see the CFLPA coming out and blatantly saying the CFL told the Elks not to do this if they didn't tell the Elks not to do this. That's a pretty bold statement to make. And if that's the case, why? Why are they telling the team not to follow that path? Now, he does take some responsibility for the original failed test. There's no question there. And the suspension, okay, fine. 2 games. You broke the rules. And you're right. He is a grown adult. It's just that situation after the fact that really throws this into a question mark for me more than any other, failed drug suspension that we've seen. Because usually it's for performance-enhancing drugs, your steroids, HGH, that kind of thing, not Adderall. Just it's a fine balance, and I'm not a fan of the instructions after the fact.
But here's the thing, though. If the Elks actually wanted to, they could have stopped this. Like I said, it kind of feels like, without casting aspersions, they were looking for an excuse. Because they could have applied. It seems very weird that the league would basically go, yeah, don't do it, when that option was available for them to then not suspend their player. It just seems very suspect at best. And the fact remains is the association also decided not to grieve the suspension either.
And that was
which is in their right.
Yeah, and I'm like, you guys strongly protest this, and then you're not even going to grieve it?
I don't think they have much of a leg to stand on the grievance side of things. He took the banned drug and only would have applied for the exemption after the fact based on the statement that the CFLPA put out. Now, if that instruction came beforehand, that's a whole different ballgame. But it sounds like this was all post-failed test that he went, oh, well, yeah, no, this is for ADHD. What do I do now? And you apply for whatever it is. I don't think even applying for it after the fact would have denied a suspension. To me, that feels like something you should have done in advance, not after you got caught.
And that's my point is, as a professional athlete, these guys need to know what's going in their body at all times. And when you're prescribed something, you probably should go through the steps to make sure it's not going to get your butts put on a suspended list or a fine or anything.
Take it to your team, and they can take it to the league.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, little drama here in the off season. Who doesn't love a little bit of CFLPA and CFL drama? Okay. Well, moving on here. Got one more thing to do, and we will continue our positional group deep dive of the Saskatchewan Roughriders roster. Last week we did the receivers, which is arguably the strongest group of the team. And now we're going to flip it to defense and the defensive backs, which is arguably the weakest part of the team because there's a lot of question marks here. So right now, under roster, we have 3 starters back in the backfield. You have Roland Milligan Jr., the MOP. So he'll be back at his regular halfback spot. DeMarcus Fields back at the other halfback spot. And then you have your combination of Jaden Dahlke, Jackson Ford at safety. So those are guys that are signed. Otherwise, your 2 cornerback spots, completely question marks right now. Now, they have other guys signed as well, too, like Antoine Brooks Jr., who was kind of like a linebacker, coverback type role. So who knows? He was on the practice roster all last year. Maybe he gets a shot somewhere. They also have Nicario Harper, Eddie Heckard, Robert Javier, Tyreek McGee, and Alfahim Walcott under roster. So to me, it seems like those 2 cornerback spots are wide open competition. So where do you guys see with what we have under, because there's some pretty big names in that free agent list that we got to talk about here in a minute, but with what we have under contract, are you guys worried about where this defensive back situation is?
Until we see more names signed to the position, whether they be those big name free agents or free agents from elsewhere. Absolutely, I'm a little concerned. We know what Milligan is. Jackson Ford and oh my lord,
Jaden Dahlke.
Jaden Dahlke. I'm literally looking at the big Dahlke Energy Cup while I'm thinking. The 2 of them are serviceable, but there's a need for an upgrade there. But the 2 gaping holes left behind Marcus Sales and the ghost of Amari Henderson is a little concerning. I think no matter who they put in, it's probably going to be an upgrade over what they had with Amari Henderson. He's very clearly a scapegoat from the end of last season, and rightfully so, in my opinion. But there is a big concern there. There is a clear gap. This is the one spot on the roster outside of defensive line where they need a massive upgrade, and they need it in the worst way.
I think based on the stories that have come out this past week too, they're definitely working on getting Sales back on the roster. And if that happens, I'm less concerned, I guess. Let's see what some of these young guys got. Lord knows it can't be any worse in some situations. That said, there's also some defensive backs in free agency. I wouldn't mind them seeing kicking the tires on.
Well, I know everybody's talking about Royce Metier from Toronto. Obviously, that would be your safety and Canadian spot there. So I know a lot of people are talking about that. That's number 1 on their wish list.
So yeah, I think there's some guys out there that they're probably keeping an eye on. But yeah, especially after his start, Marcus Sales seems to be like a no doubter on who to bring in. But then again, after his season where he was, I wouldn't be surprised if he wants to get paid because he learned last year that those contracts mean nothing.
Yeah, with BC letting him go.
I think it's pretty clear based on how last season finished off. There's one guy on that upcoming list that will not be back in Ridernation, and that's Deontay Williams. And he's a guy that I would have absolutely brought back and potentially put into one of those cornerback slots. He looked solid when given a chance, but it's like he got into Coach Mace's doghouse and never got out.
And he was replaced by Amari Henderson. Now, this is an interesting one, Deontay Williams, because for a really bad 2023 team, he was a bright spot. He showed a lot of promise that year. And obviously changing head coaches and changing philosophies in the backfield, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, maybe he wasn't up to par with what Corey Mace wanted. I mean, he still should have played over Amari Henderson at the end of the year, but that's neither here nor there now. But I think he's still young enough and has shown enough in his couple seasons here that he should be brought back, at least to you maybe pencil him in as a starter in the meantime. But his name's not etched in stone by any means as a starter. So I would like to see Deontay Williams back. Obviously, Marcus Sales, we're all on board. We know he's a must sign. So hopefully there's something we'll see in the next week or two. But Sales is probably going to at least wait till the beginning of February when the Ed Hervey window opens. So once that happens, he can take that offer back to JO and the Riders can adjust their offer, whatever they're planning on doing then. So we'll probably likely know more about that in the first week of February. Obviously, we're all on board with Omari Henderson leaving. But then there's a whole bunch of Canadians as well, too. I didn't mention that they also have Richard Adu-Beaufort signed. He's Canadian defensive back. He was drafted 2 years ago, I think. He was with the Riders in training camp last year, went back to school. So he'll be back. He finishes eligibility. He'll be back for 2025. So another at least depth piece there with all the or at the Canadian safety spot. But then Nelson Lacombo, he's a pending free agent. And I'm surprised I haven't heard anything about him this offseason whatsoever, because playing as corner, I think he played better as a corner than he did safety. But then at the end of the year, finally started to turn on in safety a little bit, at least in that game against BC in the playoffs. Had probably his best game of his career in that game. Not that one game should get you a big giant contract unless you're William Powell. But I'm surprised we haven't heard anything about Lacombo, and especially being Canadian, probably want him back, right?
And this is where the signing of Dalkey kind of surprised me, because it seemed like Lacombo, after his play, was more of a sure thing than Dalkey. But going back to the doghouse, Dalkey was in the doghouse all year last year. And so obviously they see something in him and they brought him back. I'm thinking that means they're probably going to let Lacombo walk and then try for a Metier, because signing Dalkey, other than just a depth piece, makes no sense.
I mean, at least with Jaden Dalkey, it was pretty clear why he was in the doghouse. Talented player, absolute monster over the middle, but couldn't stop taking those 15-yard penalties that were absolutely killing this team game in and game out. He's a guy you bring back because the talent is there. There's no question the talent is there. If you can get him to play between the whistles.
And then the other two pending free agents that, again, I'm surprised we haven't heard anything about in signings, which I'm assuming they're happening. They're going to happen soon. Great depth pieces. You have Godfrey Onyeka and Kosi Onyeka. Both made big-time plays last year on special teams. Special teams beasts, those guys. Don't get a lot of rotation on defense, but could step in a pinch. But guys, I think you need around. But I'm really curious what they're going to do here. Are they going to go with those or keep the Onyekas, or maybe Adu-Beaufort gets a roster spot over one of them? Do they draft another defensive back and have him, push one of the Onyekas away, kind of thing? So I'm really curious how this defensive backfield is actually going to look this season, because again, after those first three starters right now, I don't know what they're doing.
And don't get me wrong, I love the Onyekas. Almost as much as I love them as Herman Reeds, but I think if you're going to sign guys like the Onyekas, it's unfortunately just for special teams. Like they aren't making that rotation, and you could probably draft somebody or probably pick up the Onyekas like 5 days into free agency, because as good as they are, I don't see a massive rush to go sign Kosi Onyeka.
Well, that's a fair point. I I I I like. I wish we would have more continuity here in this defensive backfield, like we saw in the early 2000s when it was Ladolfius McCullough, Omar Morgan, Eddie Davis, who was it? Davin Bush was back there, Scott Gordon or Darnell Edwards at safety. But these guys need time together. And one thing that we took from Corey Mace's interview was that 2024 was about, introducing our philosophies, our, what the coaching staff wants out of players. Now that they know what it is that they want, it's 2025 is for the players to execute it. That's why I'd like to see a little bit more continuity in this defensive backfield than we've seen, because a lot of these names, Nicario Harper, Eddie Heckard, Robert Javier, Tyreek McGee, Alfahim Walcott, we know nothing about them other than, Harper and Javier were here for a cup of coffee at the end of the year when the practice roster is expanded. So,
which isn't necessarily a bad thing. That's where Roland Milligan came in.
That is how Milligan got a start. Yep.
And from game one, we saw him like, we even said this guy's going to be something special. Did we expect most outstanding player worthy special? No. But sometimes those late signings can be something. So I think you got your Milligans, you got your safety somewhat settled in. If they get Sales back with the linebackers they've already signed, the defensive line right now is the biggest question mark. Like, yes, I wish the defensive backs, I wish Sales was signed. I wish our safety was probably a little more secure than what it is right now. I still think the defensive line is weaker than the defensive backs right now.
Which I would agree with, but also I would say that defensive line is probably easier to scout in the CFL and just plug and play guys off the street. So it should be easier to find a pass rusher, a guy who in college played the 3-4, played the edge on the 3-4 defense, to come in and be an edge rusher here in the CFL and put up.
I agree, but have you seen our pass rush the last couple of seasons?
I mean, yeah, I have.
Like it was okay, but yes, like when your defensive tackle is your leading sack rusher, and yes, it's Michael freaking Johnson, but still, like we aren't getting the pressure from the edge, and that's what you need in the CFL.
I do have a question because I know DeMarcus Fields right now has that other halfback spot on lockdown. What are your thoughts on him? Because I don't really know what I think of DeMarcus Fields right now after last year. Now, I will frankly admit I don't go back and rewatch games. I just don't have the time for it anymore. And to sit and try and do my own little film work, I couldn't be bothered. I know a lot of people will go back and rewatch games, and that's great. I just don't personally have the time to do that and look anymore. But this is a guy who you didn't hear a lot of, which for defensive back is typically a good thing, but there was no real splash plays from him either. So I'm curious about what you guys think of DeMarcus Field at halfback.
Solid and unremarkable is the best way to put it. And that is honestly, in that situation, is probably the best it is, because if we're cursing you like you're Nick Marshall, that's either means you're making a very good play or a very bad play. I mean,
I'd rather have the consistency than a boom or bust. So in that 100%. Case, I don't mind DeMarcus Fields at all.
And to be fair, until Roland Milligan was intercepting the ball, that's what we said about him. You didn't talk about him because they didn't throw at him, because he was always in the right position to make plays. For some reason, they thought they could challenge him this year, and they never learned a lesson not to throw at him.
I think the fact that you really don't hear enough about him tells you everything you need to know. He's a guy in a Corey Mace defense that he's doing his job and he's doing it well to the point that you just don't realize he's out there. When you've got guys like Jamar Thurman and Roland Milligan, your defensive line that we had, you don't need guys that are making those Nick Marshall type big plays. You just don't. That's not what you need. You need the guys that are reliable, game in, game out in a defense like Mace's, where they're giving you the middle of the field and trying to create those turnovers. I have no qualms about having DeMarcus Fields back out there again.
I will say this about the defensive backfield from last year is it was some of the better tackling out of DBs I've seen in green and white in a long time. Just as a whole, this team seemed to tackle better, wrapping them up, using their arms instead of trying to just shoulder a guy down, which doesn't work. So whatever they've been preaching in practice about tackling and getting to the ball has clearly worked. And I know that's going to continue again in 2025. So I think that obviously also limits big plays. So I think that's going to be a key to their success again in 2025.
And that was part of the downfall of Amari Henderson. Like, he went to the Nick school martial art tackling, where I'm going to try to put my shoulder in a guy instead of actually taking the guy down. Like, he's shown he could play in this league. He just stopped tackling.
So it'll be interesting to see over the next couple of weeks before free agency starts if they are able to make a deal with Marcus Sayles, because I would personally feel just a lot better about the DBs, the starting unit as a whole, if Sayles is back, because then you're returning 4 guys or 4 starting positions that you know what you're getting out of, and then let the best newcomer win cornerback on the outside, right? So to me, it all hinges on Sayles.
Again, could you imagine saying that
After his first game
ago, right? Like,
That
what
game was
timeline are
so
we living
bad.
in?
I think, like, I know we remember that game, but I think if people went back and watched that game, I think it would make people mad all over again, because that
Probably.
was such a bad game for him.
But kudos to him for turning that around and turning it into an all-star season, right?
And in his defense, that game, he was not here for a very long time before that game. He didn't have a lot of time to learn this defense, but yikes. That was not your best first-time performance.
Well, there's a look at the defensive backs. We have one more week, one more show before free agency tampering window hits. So we have one more full group to get to next week, and that'll be the offensive line. And we'll throw the special teams in there too, because there's only
kickers, punters. Kickers
like
aren't people.
There's like 5 names. We can blow through that in like 4 minutes. But we'll look at the offensive line next week, because that one is a huge question mark to me, and with their current free agents anyway, with what they're going to be doing. So we'll save that for next week. But there you go. There's our positional deep dive look at the Riders defensive backs for 2024 going into 2025. And we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. But we'll leave it there for this week, and hopefully we'll have more signings to talk about next week, other than just sorry, I gotta scroll up. What's the guy's name? Rondell Bothroyd.
Put some respect on his name.
Okay.
Unlike Sean Lemon.
When Rondell is leading the league in sacks this year.
Hey, I would love that. You can clip this out in when he is, our John Chick out of nowhere, right? Or Stevie Baggs coming out of absolutely nowhere and leading the league in sacks. Clip this right now and send it to him.
We believe in you, Rondell. We believe in you.
Well, the Piffles podcast is brought to you by our friends at Dairy Queen on Elphinstone Street and Sass Drive in Regina. Special thanks go out to Kathy Festian of Royal LePage Regina Realty and Churchill Brewing Company for their support making this show possible. I do want to spend a special thanks out to everyone who joined in our social media contests we had on X and Facebook for Toque and Gloves Rider set. We have a couple more winter items to give away, so we'll do some more giveaways in the next little bit as well. But thanks for listening. Thanks for watching on SaskTel Max TV on demand, watching on YouTube. We appreciate it. We'll leave you with Tyler Gilbert, Ghost Behind Your Mind.